What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater, and let's jump into today's topic, scene transitions. Scene transitions typically come into play in short-form improv during a scene-based game where you may tell, a linear storyline within about 3 to 5 minutes, where you can't, necessarily explore all the elements of the scene within one scene, one location, so you need to transition into the next moment. You can do scene transitions in long form, like maybe a narrative piece. Typically, montages would utilize edits and other types of techniques, but I'm going to talk about scene transitions when it comes to doing it in short form improv. Scene transitions become necessary where you cannot get to the next moment without actually going to a different scene, a different location. So, for example, if there was a scene where, there was a child at home getting ready for his first day of school, and, his mother's giving him advice about how to, approach talking to people, maybe they have social anxiety and all that stuff. Ultimately, we need to see the payoff, right? The setup is the child is going to school, and maybe they might have difficulties adjusting to school, so we need to see them actually explore the school environment. Thus, we need to transition to a new scene. So this is where it becomes super helpful because we can only do so much within one environment, especially when we're trying to tell a specific story. So let's get into some specific types of scenic transitions. Typically, you can look at the structure of a scene just using the alphabet. So scene A, if you have a scene that's just existing in an A environment, then that's what it is. There's no transitions at all. And this happens pretty commonly. If you watch the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway, generally their scenes take place in one location where they don't transition to a new location. Now, if we want to actually incorporate a transition in, we would go from A to B. And notice we're going from A to B. We're going to the next step of the story where it just flows, We may not necessarily go 10 years in the future unless it's warranted and we actually need to go 10 years into the future to see some type of a payoff that was established. Like, a genie casts a spell on someone and says, in 10 years, you'll find love. Then that point, it makes sense. But ideally, our transition should be a logical progression in whatever storyline narrative that we are exploring. Now, sometimes a scene might have an additional transition, an A to B to then C. So maybe the kid that I was talking about, starts in the kitchen with his mother and then transitions to the bus. Scene B is the bus where they maybe meet who might become their best friend. They have a scene there. And then scene C might be maybe they're in math class together and they encounter a bully there. So that would be an A to B to C. And another cool way to go about it is to go from A to B back to A and kind of bring the scene full circle. So maybe that scene involves, obviously, mom and kid getting ready for school. They go to B, and maybe B involves the kid already being at their locker, and a bully comes up to them and starts picking on them, and the kid, maybe cowers a little bit and doesn't have the strength to stand up to the bully. And then we go back to scene A where the kid goes back home to the mother and, essentially has that aftermath of what just happened. And maybe the bully comes into the house, just followed him home or something, and then the mom stands up to the bully. Or maybe the mom gives advice to the kids to help him stand up to the bully. Those are some fun examples of some scene transitions where we get to explore a more fleshed out story rather than just feel stuck. Now let's get into how to actually do the scene transition, and I'm going to talk about it in terms of doing it on stage as well as online right now during this whole shelter-in-place timeline. So typically it happens where one person would initiate the transition by just leaving the stage. Now you might be thinking, do you do a transition when anybody leaves the stage? And I always preface this by saying follow the focus, okay? Don't follow the lever. Because there might be a scene where, the mailman comes in and says, I got some letter from the admissions department at Harvard. Here you go. And then they lead the scene. You're not going to follow the mailman. You want to stick with the focus of this kid maybe got accepted into Harvard. We need to see that explored. But when that kid says, hey, you know what? I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to go pack my bags. Bye. And they lead the scene. At that point, we transition to the next moment. Maybe we transition to them packing upstairs in their room. Or maybe we transition all the way to Harvard, where we kind of just fast forward in time a little bit. But with that initiation, that example, we follow who is in the focus, in the spotlight of the story, kind of like the protagonist of the story. So make sure you always follow the focus of this story. And when that focus leaves the stage, generally everybody on stage would kind of clear, similar to what you would do with an edit. If someone edits you, everybody kind of clears off to the side so that we can make way for the next scene. And typically what I like to say is, if, for example, the kid who was going off to Harvard left the scene, I like to let someone off to the side. Maybe there's a third person who wasn't in scene A. Let them establish the environment, you know? Maybe they come out and they're at the locker room at Harvard, or maybe they're establishing that they're in class, like they're at their desk writing down, you know, notes from a previous session or something. Or maybe they'll just be upstairs and they're like the kid brother of the kid going to Harvard, you know? And they're like, you know, sad because their big bro's gonna leave school and they'll be all alone. So I like to give the creative freedom over to the third person, where we're not just like following everything that the protagonist is doing. We want to transfer leadership roles, okay? So like follow like whatever is the next idea that comes out, as long ideally that it centers around the story that we're establishing. So let's get into doing scene transitions on Zoom now. Let's say, for example, there's a scene with 3 people. I usually encourage scenes to start with 2 people, just so you can find the, you know, the idea in a more controlled environment. And the third person's covered, and that third person has the ability to be ready for the transition, or they can also uncover and enter the scene. So maybe they would uncover and become the mailman in scene A. But I always say be ready for that transition, because they have that ability to help move along the story when that transition happens. So let's say scene A, person A wants to go to Harvard, okay? So they say, you know what, I'm gonna go to Harvard and make a better person of myself, okay? So they initiate the transition by covering their camera. The person in scene A with them also covers their camera, and then person 3 uncovers their camera and they establish the environment, okay? I always say let that third person maybe get the initiation line. So that way it kind of gives you an idea where you are. You know, you could be upstairs in your room, you could be at Harvard. Listen to that third person's initiation idea and follow it. Be prepared to let go of your idea, because sometimes you might be thinking, oh, I'm gonna be in Harvard, but the third person decided maybe you were at the bus station, or maybe on a plane, or maybe upstairs in your bedroom packing. So be ready for that, okay? Make it flow. It's gonna take some time, so I always say just practice just doing simple scenes with no games attached to them, and just see if you can tell like a short form narrative and maybe like 3 scenes, 2 transitions. Try it out. And one more quick thing is, sometimes transitions can feel a little expository, right? Like we're saying where we're gonna go. And especially right now on Zoom, I always tell people, don't worry, be a little expository right now. Don't worry about it. And the best way to make your line of dialogue not sound so expository is use emotion as you say the line, okay? So for example, if a kid downstairs was getting upset and they wanted to do a transition where maybe they just go upstairs to the bedroom, they might be like, you know, an expository line of dialogue would be like, I'm gonna go to my bedroom, you know, just something like that. But that gives it a clear indication of where they're going, but it sounds a little bit robotic, right? But if you inject emotion, it's like, whatever, screw you, mom, I'm going upstairs to my bedroom to play Halo. They cover their camera, and it's a little expository, but it feels more natural just because it had that less robotic tone. It had that more emotional delivery. So inject emotion, and don't be afraid to be a little expository right now when we're initiating these transitions, because it does inform your cast members, you know, and gives them gifts as well as to where the story might go next. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this episode of MUT Tips. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like down below, or comment with somebody you would like addressed in a future video. I'd love to hear it. Also, subscribe on YouTube to be informed of upcoming videos. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye!